Today, I want to talk about how we transition ourselves from being non-sexual to having sex, because it really does take some work to get your brain transitioned from one state to the next. No matter how you feel about your sex life, I think you'll find some things in today's episode that will help you. Hi there and welcome. I'm your host, Dr. Heather England. I wear lots of hats as a coach, psychotherapist, and sex therapist. I want to empower you to embrace your relationships and feel really good about your sex life. I'm so excited about today's episode, so let's jump right in. If you're like me, or like 99% of the women I work with, you aren't always in the mood when your partner is. And you know what? They can feel pretty rejected when they hear a repeated no. In general, I think it's never a good idea to have sex when you really don't want to. And I've talked about that in the past, and I will continue to talk about that because if there's one thing I want to do with this podcast, it's to help people to feel empowered to own their own sexuality. I don't want women to be walking around on this earth feeling like they are an object just to satisfy somebody else's sexual cravings. You're worth so much more than that. But there are times when you do want to be sexual with your partner and you're just really not feeling it. And there are some specific things you can do that might help you to get more in the mood. One of the biggest reasons that couples come to sex therapy is because they have what we call a desire discrepancy. What that means is either one partner wants more sex or a different type of sex than the other partner. I would say that the majority of relationships probably experience this on some level, but for some people, it's pretty dramatic. Unfortunately, oftentimes, it's the higher desire partner that thinks the lower desire partner should be the one changing in the relationship. And honestly, I don't believe that at all. I think there's some level of compromise. I never think that one partner or the other is wrong when they have a desire mismatch. Instead, we've got to figure out what's going on here. Why is there a desire mismatch? Sometimes there's lots of reasons for it. But if one person really doesn't want to have sex all the time or doesn't want to have a certain type of sex, I think that's okay for them. It becomes really important for couples to be able to communicate about sex and then reach some level of compromise and figure out how are they going to resolve this for themselves as a couple. And when it comes down to it, talking about sex is the thing that most couples struggle with. In fact, I think that's such an important topic. I'm going to do an entire episode about how do we talk about sex and how do we tell our partners we're interested in sex or we're not interested in sex or we don't like what they're doing sexually or we love what they're doing sexually. So stay tuned for that. But today, what I want to talk about is how we transition ourselves from being non-sexual to being sexual. Because it's not like we can just pull a switch. You know, we might be loading the dishes or doing laundry or busy thinking about something for work or talking to one of our kids about something. And then what? All of a sudden, we're supposed to become this like sexy person that can't wait to have sex with their partner. It just doesn't work that way. I found that some people like to plan sex and other people think sex isn't real unless it's spontaneous. I disagree with that last part. I think sex is real regardless of when you have it, whether it's spontaneous or it's planned. And sometimes it's just a heck of a lot easier to plan sex. So what I'm going to talk about today is if you know you're going to have sex, how do you transition your brain from being non-sexual to being sexual? Our brain is actually our biggest sex organ. In fact, it really controls the whole process of us being sexual. Let me share something about myself. I have ADHD. I've had it my whole life, and as an adult, I've really learned to manage it, but it still really does impact me. One thing that people with ADHD struggle with more than other people is transitioning from one activity to another. And that's one of the reasons why I thought this would be a good episode. There are a lot of people out there with ADHD. So knowing that sometimes it is hard to transition, just knowing that can be validating, but also thinking ahead of time about what some of the things are that you can do that will help you to transition into being sexual. I think that's really important to do. So I have a go-to list of things that I do if I want to get myself in the mood to have sex. If I know I have said to my partner, hey, let's have sex at 6 o'clock tonight, because honestly, I'm too tired at 9 or 10. So if we can have it earlier, I'm doing it earlier, but we're lucky. We don't have little kids underfoot. So we have flexibility to do that. And oh my God, if my kids are listening to this, they're probably just cringing right now. Don't call me at 6, guys. Anyway, if I'm going to have sex at 6 o'clock with my partner, then I'm backing up from 6 o'clock and I'm kind of psyching myself up and thinking about becoming sexy, thinking about what do I want out of a sexual experience. I'm not really thinking that much about what he wants or how I'm going to serve his needs. At that point, I'm thinking about me. I'm thinking about what do I have to do to get myself turned on, to get myself to start feeling desire for a sexual experience with my partner. And even though I love my partner incredibly, I'm not always like excited about having sex. Like I don't just run around thinking about that all day long. So I do go through a series of activities to kind of get myself in the mood. And that's okay if I am willing and want to have sex. We've talked about consent on the podcast before. If you don't want to have sex and you're not willing to have sex, then all of these things are not going to work because you have to really deep down want to have the sexual experience for it to work. So bottom line, if you are interested and willing in having a sexual encounter with your partner, then I would encourage you to ask yourself, what do I need to do to transition to being open to having sex? What is going to get me in the mood? So I want to give you some ideas of some things that might work for you. So one thing you could do is to do something that makes you feel close to your partner. It could be having dinner together, having a drink together, taking a shower together, snuggling, having a real talk, like a real connecting talk in which you feel like you're not just talking about admin things or about just the business of daily life. Taking a walk together can be really connecting, even if you just walk the dog. Even something as simple as doing the dishes together can be something that can be connecting for couples. All of us feel closer and more connected to our partners when we're doing something together, something that feels good, something that releases some dopamine. So for women especially, doing something together prior to a sexual encounter can make you feel more in love with your partner. It just makes you feel close to them, and it kind of sets you up to be more open to being sexual with them. Another thing you could do is you could think about past sexual experiences that you've had with your partner that have been fulfilling and enjoyable, and think about what led up to them, and then try to recreate some of that. Now, you can't always do things like, head off to a hotel or head on a vacation, or go out to this mega romantic dinner, but you can do some different elements of that. Maybe it was that you wanted something exciting, that there was some thrill about that particular encounter, that context that got you really interested in sex. It might be that it was something new that you did. It might be that it was a little bit risky. And so some of those things may be turn-ons for you. Everyone's different. Everyone's going to have different turn-ons. Whatever turn-ons work for you, by golly, those are your turn-ons, and that's a good thing, and embrace those, right? You don't need to be focused on what someone else's turn-ons are. Just worry about what makes you feel more turned on about sex. Because again, there's no wrong here for you. Whatever it is that feels good to you, long as it's legal, you're good to go. Some of the more simple things you can do to get yourself transitioned to sex is just to think about it. Think about being sexual with your partner. Think about the parts of it that you enjoy or that you look forward to. You can fantasize in your mind about sex. You can fantasize about your favorite celebrity. You can fantasize about whoever you want to fantasize about or about whatever sexual activity you want to fantasize about. There's lots of research on fantasies, and many people have very rich and robust fantasy lives regarding sexuality. And you would be surprised at the number of people that actually fantasize about things like using sex toys or having kinky sex or having sex with multiple partners. Whatever fantasy turns you on, it's your fantasy and it's okay. It's important for you to feel empowered to have a fantasy if you want. And you do not need to share your fantasy with your partner. You're not cheating with your partner if you're having a fantasy in your head. You're not actually having sex with that person. You're just thinking about it. You're fantasizing about it. It's okay. That's what a fantasy is. It's kind of like you can fantasize about being a multimillionaire and traveling around the world all the time. It might not happen for you, but just fantasizing about it is kind of fun. Another thing you can do is you can watch or listen to or read some erotica. If you find that that is an activity that turns you on, then by golly, go do it. There is pornography available that actually shows real couples having real sexual encounters. And that's a lot different than the pornography that you think about the most, the kind of pornography that has actors or models that have distorted bodies, that have extra large genitalia, that engage in some really significant kinky activities or do things that, you would never do in real life. Sometimes it's a turn on to see that type of pornography, but for some people, it really is a real turn off. And you can watch or listen to or read erotica by yourself, or you can even do it with your partner. And for many people, that's actually a turn on to share that type of experience together. Another way to transition to sexual activity is to quiet your brain, to do a little meditation, and to become present, to become fully present in your body and completely relax. Another option is to do self-talk. You can actually talk yourself into getting excited about a sexual encounter. How we frame things really impacts our mindset about them and our attitude about them. So if you tell yourself, oh, I have to do this, or I dread doing this, or this is just another task, then yeah, you're not going to want to do it. But if your self-talk is more, oh, I get to do this. I get to be with my partner. I get to have this very special time with them. Then your mindset's going to be a lot more positive and you're going to be more excited. I often like to take a shower or a bath because it completely relaxes my body. And I also like to listen to some relaxing music while I'm doing that. I think for many people, wearing something that makes them feel sexual is a great way to transition to sexual activity. It just makes you feel really good about yourself. And then as part of that, putting on lotion or cologne or perfume, whatever it is, it just makes you feel attractive. I think mood is really important. So lighting a candle or dimming the lights or having some background music, those can be things that can just really set the stage. And then I think another thing that can transition is you just do a little old-fashioned flirting, being playful and being fun. I mean, sex should be fun. It should not be something we don't enjoy doing. So how can you make it be more fun? So being playful can really do that. And then a final thing you can do if you really want to start to get yourself aroused ahead of time is you can masturbate. It's okay. You can give yourself permission to use a sex toy or your hand and just kind of warm yourself up and get yourself in the mood. Whatever it is that you need to do, I say go for it. Do it. Give yourself permission. You are a sexual being. We were all wired to be sexual beings. For women, the only purpose of the clitoris is for pleasure. Unfortunately, there are so many things that happen in our society that cause both women and men to have difficulties with sex. We have shame. We have sexual trauma. For women, we are oftentimes objectified and sexualized. We have sex when we don't want to have sex, which kills our desire. We're exhausted. Women do the lion's share of the work around the house. I think it's 37% more for married couples, even if they're both working. So women are doing an awful lot and they're flat exhausted a lot of the time. So naturally, sex becomes another thing on the to-do list. But the thing about this is it doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't. All of these things can cause us to disconnect from our sexuality to the point where we shut it down and we really don't enjoy it that much anymore. But it doesn't have to be this way. It really can be different. So I encourage you, think about what it is that would help you to get turned on so you can transition from being non-sexual to feeling like you are sexy and you are in the mood for having some type of sexual activity with your partner. The more you try different activities to transition and get turned on, the more you're going to find what works for you and doesn't work for you. You're going to find your go-to ways to get yourself in the mood so you can be more open to sex. And then you can let that responsive desire kick in. And sometimes you might even feel some spontaneous desire and you can initiate sex. But maybe you never will. And that's okay too. The bottom line is I want you to feel empowered to own your own sexuality in a really positive way in your life. Sex can feel so good and it can be such a special way to connect with your partner. And we're all on a journey to reclaim that for ourselves if we've lost it along the way. I'm just trying to help you a little more on your journey. Whew, well, I feel like that kind of got to be a heavy episode. But I thank you if you've hung on this long and listened to the entire podcast. I hope you were able to get something out of it that you can apply to your life. So my challenge for you is to think about maybe 3 ways that you can start to transition yourself so you can change your brain and change your mindset so you can go from doing some activity like going for a walk or doing the dishes and transition yourself into feeling sexy and interested in sex. Thanks again for listening. And if you really found this episode was helpful to you, it might be something you want to share with a friend. It's okay for us to talk about sex with people we care about. It's okay to talk about sex. Your friend may actually be having some of the same issues with sex and same challenges as you. And maybe you be helping them a lot to share some resources. All right, so until next time, I wish you the ability to create the best life for yourself and that you can also empower yourself to create the type of sex life you want. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.